Okay, everyone. Let's talk about something truly iconic. The Great Pyramid of Giza. I mean, we all know that silhouette against the sky. It's just, well, it's a wonder.
Absolutely. A symbol of ancient ingenuity. But, seeing it from the outside is one thing.
Right, but going inside, that's a whole different story, isn't it? It gives you a totally new perspective.
It really does. You're moving past that, postcard image and actually stepping into the structure itself.
Mm.
The passages, the chambers, all the history packed inside those stones.
And that's exactly what we want to get into today. We've looked at quite a bit of material articles, research papers, exploration reports.
All sorts of stuff.
Yeah, to give you the best possible picture of what it's like to actually go inside the Great Pyramid today, what we know about the layout inside, how technology is finding, well, hidden spaces.
Spaces unseen for thousands of years.
Exactly. And crucially, how all these details, these internal clues, connect to the big questions about how it was even built. We're going to pull out the key insights for you.
It's about getting a feel for the sheer complexity, the human effort involved, which you really sense from the inside.
Okay, so let's start right there. You arrive, you're at the entrance, you take that first step inside. What hits you first?
Well, forget any ideas of vast open halls right away. The experience for visitors now is, well, it's physical. You're immediately into passages that are narrow and steep.
Steep? Really?
Oh, yeah. And some people definitely find them claustrophobic.
So it's not exactly a leisurely stroll through history then.
Not at all, no. They've obviously made it accessible.
Right.
They've put down non-slip wooden boards. There are handrails, basic lighting.
Sensible precautions.
But even with that, you're constantly bending over or climbing these inclines. It takes effort. And honestly, that effort immediately gives you a sense of the scale, the difficulty the original workers must have faced.
I can imagine. It makes it real. Just how narrow do these passages get?
Some of the tightest spots, both height and width, are less than 1.2 meters.
Wow.
Pretty cramped. And what's interesting is the descriptions say the stone surfaces there are incredibly smooth. Some people theorize that maybe the size was determined by the dimensions of the sarcophagus they had to get through.
Imagine wrestling a multi-ton stone box through a space that tight. Okay, so how long does this trek take, roughly, to get to the main chamber?
One source suggested about 20 minutes to reach the king's chamber. Another mentioned something like 10 minutes each way for the main internal route people take.
So you're committed once you start.
Definitely. It's not a quick peek inside.
And then after all that climbing, you finally arrive in the king's chamber. What's that like?
Right. That's the main destination for most visitors. And you see it, the big granite sarcophagus is there. But it's not like Tutankhamun's tomb,
No treasure.
No gold, no burial goods found there. It's surprisingly plain, really. More functional, perhaps.
Interesting. Now, what about taking pictures? I seem to remember that used to be a big no-no inside.
Ah, yes. It's actually changed quite a bit. Nowadays, smartphones are generally allowed everywhere on the Giza Plateau. Temples, pyramids, tombs. That was a major shift.
Okay.
However, there's a key restriction. Video recording is absolutely forbidden inside the burial chambers themselves, especially near the sarcophagus.
Yeah.
Even with a phone, they watch for that.
Good to know.
And for people with, more serious gear, DSLRs, mirrorless cameras, still not allowed inside the pyramids. Outside is fine, though. Tripods are usually okay outside, too.
Right. Practical tips there. Okay, let's move deeper inside, conceptually. Beyond the main tourist path, what are some of the really crucial internal features we need to understand?
Well, the king's chamber itself is fundamental, particularly how it's built. If you look up, you see these enormous granite beams making the roof. But the striking thing is, you can see large cracks in some of them.
Cracks in those huge granite beams. That sounds concerning.
It does. And traditionally, the thinking was, oh, these must be from earthquakes centuries later.
Yeah.
But there's this other really interesting idea from an architect named Gilles Dormion.
What's his theory?
He suggested these cracks might actually have formed during construction, that the sheer weight of the stone being piled above caused them to crack as they were building.
Wow, so the pyramid was literally groaning under its own weight as it went up.
That's the implication. It suggests the builders were maybe dealing with structural problems in real time, perhaps even changing plans as they went. It shifts the perspective quite a bit.
That really changes how you think about it. Okay, what else?
And then, of course, there's the Grand Gallery. That's probably the most impressive internal space visually.
That really tall, sloping corridor leading up towards the king's chamber.
That's the one. It has this amazing corbelled vault roof, where the stones overlap inwards as they go up.
Yes, I've seen pictures.
What's really notable is how much wider this vault is compared to similar ones in other pyramids. And some recent findings suggest there might be a reason for that. There's this idea of a large hidden space, often called the Big Void, right above the gallery.
A hidden void.
Yeah, and the theory is that this void might actually relieve some of the pressure on the gallery's roof, allowing it to be built wider, a kind of clever hidden structural support.
Fascinating. An architectural feature hidden from view. What about those strange cutouts along the sides of the gallery?
Ah, yes. The notches and niches. There's a series of vertical niches along the walls. Apparently they were filled with mortar and then sort of shallowly recarved, which is odd in itself. And then you have these sloped horizontal notches cut into the ramps on either side. Those are a real mystery. People have suggested they held timber beams, maybe for some kind of machine.
But no clear answer.
But honestly, no theory really explains everything about them convincingly. Why they're shaped that way, why they're positioned as they are. It's still debated.
Still secrets held right there in the main passage. What about the slope? It looks incredibly steep.
The floor angle is about 26 degrees. They've added modern wooden stairs with treads for tourists now, but sources say it was originally just a smooth, walkable ramp.
Walkable, but steep.
Definitely. And right at the top end of the gallery, just before the passage to the king's chamber, there's this big step. Interestingly, it's located exactly on the pyramid's central north-south axis.
A step. Any idea what that was for?
Well, its original purpose is, again, debated. It's been patched up over time. One idea is that it might have helped with sliding ropes, perhaps part of some counterbalance system for moving heavy things inside.
Which brings us back to the mechanics, how they actually built this thing. And that leads us nicely to perhaps the most mysterious parts explored recently, those shafts from the Queen's chamber.
Right. The Queen's chamber, which is lower down in the pyramid, has these two very narrow shafts leading off from it, going upwards. One north, one south.
And nobody's quite sure what they were for?
Lots of theories. Were they ventilation? Or maybe for sighting specific stars? Some think they were symbolic, like passages for the pharaoh's spirit, his ka, to ascend. Others wonder if they were for something physical, maybe pouring sand or who knows.
And they're incredibly narrow, right? So you can't just walk up them.
Exactly. Too small for a person, which is where the robots come in. This is where modern tech has been crucial.
Tell us about that, the robot explorations.
Okay, so back in the early 90s, an engineer named Rudolf Gantenbrink designed a small robot called UPA. He sent it up both shafts.
And what did it find?
In the northern shaft, it got about 19 meters in before it hit a turn it couldn't make. But in the southern shaft, it kept going. It traveled about 63.5 meters out.
That far. Deep inside the pyramid structure, did it find anything significant?
Oh, yes. First, at around 57 meters, Upupa 2 encountered a small step, about 40 millimeters high. It actually managed to climb over it.
Clever robot.
And then, a bit further on, at roughly 63.5 meters, it ran into a stone block. A stone placed deliberately across the shaft, completely blocking it. This became known as the first blocking stone.
A dead end. Sealed off. What did that stone look like?
Well, the really intriguing part was that it had two small metal objects embedded in it near the center. They looked like copper pins or handles.
Copper handles? What on earth?
And no one knows. That's one of the big mysteries. And beyond that first stone, the robot's camera could just glimpse a small gap, maybe 200 millimeters deep, and then another stone surface behind it, the second blocking stone.
So a stone, a little gap, then another stone. How did we ever find out what was in that gap?
Right, that needed another mission. The Jedi project, supported by Dassault Systems, they had to design a new robot, one specifically built for these incredibly tough conditions.
What kind of challenges did it face?
Think about it. It had to climb that steep 40-degree incline for nearly 70 meters, get over that 40-millimeter step, hold itself steady on the slope to deploy tools, and carry cameras and lights. They did loads of tests with prototypes, figuring out wheel sizes, traction mechanisms. Yeah. It was serious engineering.
And did it succeed? Did it see beyond the first stone?
It did. The Jedi robot managed to drill a tiny hole through that first blocking stone in the southern shaft and insert a microcamera, like an endoscope.
Okay, the moment of truth. What did the camera show?
This is where it gets really exciting. Through the hole, they saw a small, apparently empty chamber. The walls and ceiling looked like they were carved from the same piece of stone just behind the first block, what they call a U-block. It suggested the first stone was slid into place, maybe resting on a little ledge.
Okay, small hidden chamber. Anything else?
Yes, the floor. That's where the real surprises were.
What was on the floor?
They saw a distinct red ochre line, like a mason's guideline, running straight along the floor from just behind the first stone towards the second one. And where the line hit the second stone, there was a clear black mark.
A builder's mark.
Seems like it. And even more amazing, off to the right of this line, there were three figures painted in red ochre. They look like maybe hieratic script, that's the cursive form of hieroglyphs,
Yeah.
potentially representing a number, maybe 21, plus a couple of other small red marks.
Wow. Actual marks left by the builders sealed away for millennia. That's incredible.
Isn't it? Finding traces of the actual workers in such a hidden spot? It was a huge discovery. But, it just opened up more questions.
Like what?
Well, immediately you wonder,
Yeah.
why the straight red line? What does it mark? What do those red symbols actually mean? And what is that second blocking stone? Is it just the end wall of this little chamber? Or is it another blocking stone sealing something else further on?
So many new mysteries revealed by trying to solve an old one.
Precisely. It shows just how much we still don't know about the pyramid's interior.
Okay, let's pull back a bit. How do these internal discoveries, like the shafts and that potential big void you mentioned, tie into the bigger picture of how the pyramid was actually built?
Right, the big void. That theory came from Gilles Dormion and another French amateur Egyptologist back in 2004. They used ground-penetrating radar and architectural analysis.
And their idea wasn't just about the void itself, but about the construction process.
Exactly. They proposed that maybe the pyramid wasn't designed perfectly from day one, that the builders might have had to adapt the plans as they went along. Perhaps they ran into structural issues, maybe realizing the original chamber designs couldn't take the weight.
Which connects back to those cracks in the king's chamber beams you mentioned earlier.
It could. If Dormy is right that those cracks happened during construction, it supports the idea that they were facing real engineering challenges and might have had to improvise or change course. Maybe the void was part of a revised plan to redistribute weight.
So, are scientists trying to get a better look at this void?
Yes. In 2022, plans were announced by a team led by Alan Bross to use a much more powerful imaging technique called muon tomography.
Muon tomography, like a giant X-ray.
Sort of, yeah. It uses natural cosmic ray particles, muons, that pass through stone. By measuring how many get through, you can detect density differences, like voids. They hope this will give a much clearer picture. But right now, nobody can say for sure if that void is, Khufu's real secret burial chamber or just a structural feature. Still a history.
Fascinating. And what other clues from inside help us understand the building methods?
Well, if you look at the construction of earlier pyramids, like Sneferu's Bent Pyramid, you can actually see a change in how they laid the stone courses. They started by sloping them inwards, but then switched to laying them flat, horizontally,
Why the change?
for stability.
Yeah.
That horizontal layering provides much more structural integrity. It's almost certain they used that horizontal method throughout most of the Great Pyramid.
And we always have to come back to the sheer effort involved.
Absolutely. Just moving the average core blocks, maybe 1.5 tons each, millions of them. That's immense. But then you get to the king's chamber roof. Those granite beams weigh up to 80 tons.
80 tons.
Getting those into position high up inside the pyramid, possibly through relatively narrow internal passages, that's the core challenge for any construction theory.
Did the ancients leave any clues about how they did it?
We have later accounts, like from the Greek historians Herodotus and Diodorus Siculus, writing centuries after the pyramid was built. They mention things like levers or machines made of wood used to lift stones step by step. Herodotus even had this slightly strange idea they might have built parts from the top down using these machines.
But the main theory involves ramps, doesn't it?
Ramps are generally the most accepted idea for getting the bulk of the material up, whether it's a single long straight ramp or ramps that zigzagged up the outside or spiraled around, or maybe even an internal ramp.
An internal ramp.
Yeah.
Built inside the pyramid itself.
That's one hypothesis gaining traction. Maybe an external ramp for the lower part, then transitioning to a ramp spiraling upwards inside the structure. Some even think the Grand Gallery itself might have been part of a clever internal ramp or counterweight system. The problem is there's not much direct archaeological evidence left for massive external ramps.
So ramps were likely key, but probably not the whole story.
Probably. Most experts think it was likely a combination. Ramps for the majority of blocks, supplemented by levering techniques, especially for the highest levels, and those incredibly heavy granite beams.
And we even have new clues about just getting the stone to the Giza site, right?
Yes. Really interesting recent work. A study from May 2024 suggests there was an ancient branch of the Nile, which they've called the Aramat branch, that flowed much, much closer to the Giza Plateau back then.
So they could bring stones by boat?
Exactly. It would have allowed them to transport huge quantities of limestone, probably from the Tura quarries across the river, much closer to the construction site by boat, drastically cutting down the overland hauling distance. That's a big piece of the logistics puzzle.
That makes a lot of sense. Any other small clues from inside?
There's even information from the mortar they used. Carbon dating of tiny organic fragments, like bits of charcoal found in the mortar, suggests that some of the wood burned to heat the gypsum for mortar was centuries old when it was burned.
Old wood. What does that tell us?
It might point towards some resource management issues. Maybe firewood was scarce, or perhaps they were recycling old timber, maybe from previous construction projects or boats. It's a small detail, but it gives a fascinating glimpse into the practicalities they faced.
It's just incredible, isn't it? Going inside transforms the pyramid from this, solid monument into a complex network of passages, chambers, hidden clues, and lingering questions.
It really does. Visiting the inside is like traveling through layers of history, amazing engineering feats, and mysteries that still haven't been completely solved. You feel the physical reality of the space. You see these famous features like the King's Chamber and Grand Gallery, but you also know about these hidden spaces being probed by robots and all the different ideas about how it was achieved.
And it's striking that even with all our technology, robots, muon scans, carbon dating, there are still fundamental things we don't know for sure about what's inside and exactly how they built it.
It really highlights the scale of the achievement, doesn't it? The builders were incredibly sophisticated, and their methods, in some ways, still challenge our understanding.
Definitely. So maybe something for you all to think about after this. Given everything we've explored today, what other secrets might still be locked inside the Great Pyramid's massive stone heart, just waiting for the right technology or the right explorer to bring them to light?